Symposium, and I believe we're in for a real treat. It's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Katina Michael from the University of Wollongong. She has had industry experience in telecommunications engineering and holds cross-disciplinary qualifications in information technology and law. For those of you who must know, she worked on transnational crime prevention. She does something a little bit different. We heard a lot about all the small things that we can put in our brains, in our bodies, hearts, lungs, legs. But Katina really looks at the big picture, and I think we're in for a philosophical talk about socio-ethical implications of the bionic era.
Thank you so much, Judith. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging my sister-in-law, who slept in the Lord yesterday at 6 p.m. I know she would want me to have given this talk, and it's coincidental that it's the Academy of Science, given that she had great faith in God. So science is the pursuit of truth, and we, as Christians in my belief system, believe in life after death. It doesn't mean we stop developing these wonderful technologies because there is immortality to come. But in actuality, we are developing technologies that are life-sustaining and life-enhancing because we love this wonderful earth we live in. The greatness would be if we could prevent all of these diseases, of which one of these diseases took my sister-in-law and left an 8 and 4-year-old and my brother without her. We have great hope. We've heard about implantable devices for so many different organs in the body. We must be like mad scientists, as Michael said, because we're here to sustain life. However, I would be propelling a myth if I was to say to you today here that implantables will help us to live forever. Because after all, someone has to flip that switch, even if we do away with every limb on our body and become technology. So thank you to the Academy of Science. Thank you to my colleagues, Gordon Wallace, who's been a great mentor and supporter of my work, always challenges me, and I hope I challenge him back. There's also another Wallace here, Vicky Wallace, who was instrumental early on in my research career in helping me to get my research out to the general public. I'm also excited to be the Associate Dean International in a vibrant engineering faculty that is about to launch a biomedical engineering degree next year. We are all for biomedical engineering. So please keep this in mind as I challenge you throughout this last talk of this wonderful day on medical bionics. I'm the editor-in-chief of IEEE Technology and Society magazine. IEEE has 500 million members. Our society is quite small, it's probably one of the smallest. But we look at the implications of technology. And here we do include bionics, and we do include nanobionics and medical bionics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and the converging industry that is happening right before us and we are engaged in. My hope, however, is to get closer to the true meaning of interdisciplinarity. For me, and my fellow researchers who come from many varied disciplines, we don't just think about interdisciplinarity as being a multitude of engineers and clinicians. No. We think about interdisciplinary teams as involving sociologists, ethicists, theologians, philosophers, creative artists, educators, members of the community. We often forget that we're building for the patients, and yet we never see the patients, or seldom see the patients as engineers. We spin off, commercialize, and let somebody else do that. And that's why I enjoyed the previous talk given by our Irish colleague, because it was about the patient and about getting direct feedback. Oh, that lead is too short, I can't go to the toilet. Where is that qualitative research that we all should be delving into? The copious amounts during the clinical trials that are hidden away from publication. The ones that say That deep brain stimulation implant caused me massive anxiety. I felt this instant doom feeling. That electroconvulsive therapy put me into a state of catatonia for 3 months. That epilepsy treatment of vagus nerve stimulation caused me to have orgasms as I walked down the street. These are real stories. These are real side effects, everyone. Hypersexuality as being a side effect of implants. Of course it would be. We're dabbling with the most sensitive organ of the body, the brain. So let's get real also about implants. I've heard about cosmetic applications of breast implants today. My best friend is a breast cancer survivor. 2 years ago, she had breast reconstruction. She said it took me 3 months to recover, and if anyone had told me it would feel this bad, I would never have done it. Sure, I look great again, Katina, but I went through hell. It was worse than chemo. So please don't talk about implants as if there's some kind of injection on and off button. They're not. They change the human body as it was in its natural state. The young man that I overheard talking to one of the clinicians at the Prince of Wales Hospital just last week when I was there, undergoing my own procedure. The clinician walks in and says, "Are you nervous?" And the young man says, "Why should I be?" "Well, yes, you're receiving an implant in your back." I wanted to block my ears, not because of the implant. My son's getting an implant likely on his shoulder, possibly even tomorrow, because he had a football injury last week. I'm not against implants. I'm not against screws in the body. I'm not against prosthesis. But the young man, on the day of his operation, was learning what that implant would be about. He was given this 20-minute right before my eyes in the waiting room. This is how you use the remote control. If it hurts a bit, turn it down. It was a crash course, people. It wasn't weekly education over time. It wasn't, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" And of course, this man, being so paralyzed and not being able to walk more than 5 meters or stand up, would want anything, because anything would be better than what he was living through. I understand that. But where was the informed consent? Yes, the paperwork was there. Yes, he knew what he was signing. Yes, 10 times over before he went into the anesthetic, he was asked, "And on which side are we doing this? And what are you having done? And what's your birth date? And what's your name?" I had to go through the same procedure. But when he said, "How big is the incision going to be?" She said, "Oh no, there's no incision. You're just going to have this thing that's like a needle but really large, and it doesn't give you a fine injection like a normal vaccine. It's like a hole in your back." And I saw him gasp. Oh. And sometimes you might get this tingly feeling. Some people like it, some people hate it. Oh. And if you decide to go far away from the hospital, make sure you come back to base every week or so we can make sure, ring us if the alarm goes off and drives you nuts overnight, but don't worry, you've got 36 hours to recover. That's the reality. That's what the patient hears. Please don't talk about implants like they're nothing, like you can go in and jack into a computer and jack out. That's not what an implant is. It's a physiological intrusion. It's a big thing. You don't undertake these procedures lightly. When I was 7 or 8 years of age, just like probably Michael was watching Blake C7 in the UK, I was watching the Transformers. Episode 11, The Ultimate Doom. It was called Operation Guinea Pig. The Decepticons knew how they would enslave the human race using a microchip behind the ear. And turning this microchip on, they were able to get the humans to create more Cybertron cubes to give them energy. I used to think that was pie in the sky. Now we're either continuing on with the myth in front covers of The Economist, Time magazine, Huffington Post, Forbes magazine, and a whole lot more of our supposedly respectable outlets, but jacking in to become immortal in this world? Yes, that's a transhumanist belief. Transformers, transhumanist, I see the parallels. And if othering, which has become a wonderful process that sociologists talk about, those guys with the implants, the guys, the biohackers, the maker revolution, let's outer the others because they're different to me. But what we often don't forget is that we shouldn't be othering each other for our beliefs, whatever they might be. I'm a proponent of not regulating certain things. For example, if you wish to get a biomodified implant for your body, go ahead and do it. So long as you're not insane clinically, go ahead and do it. I have no right to govern your body, but at the same time, if I wish to reject an implant, I should be able to have that right equally. And so now we have Powerpacks. Kevin Warwick, my friend, who was involved in Cyborg 1.0 back in 1998, used to joke to me over dinner, Katina, you know why we have these things here? You know why God created us with these empty spaces here? So we can put implants in them and battery packs. Of course. And I'm glad to see the new innovations that Rob Shepherd was talking about regarding battery packs somewhere else, closer to the head. Not to have those deep incisions. Go onto YouTube, type in vagus nerve stimulation or deep brain stimulation. Have a look at the stories that are coming out from the recipients of these new devices, talking to us about their scars, about their developments. What you'll find is there's a huge novelty effect. I just got my, DBS. I just got my VNS. I feel like I've got so much energy. I feel great. Everything's cured. At least for those stories and people for whom the application has actually worked. And I believe it has. But then monitor them in the second and third week, and they sort of go back to possibly being a little bit sad, as they have self-described, a little bit depressed. And some of them even say they switch off their device, for example, in the case of VNS, just to know what it feels like before you had that implant in you. And they switch it back on after a few minutes. And some people have cured, or at least not cured, but put at bay their Tourette's syndrome, their Parkinson's disease, their OCD, the manic depressive episodes, their major depressive disorder. But how long will it be, ladies and gentlemen, before we look at the brain as a hard determinism, as a machine itself, and say, you know what, there's no such thing as consciousness. You're shy, you've got anxiety, you get headaches. Don't worry, let's medical image your brain and figure out what you really have and whether you should be suitable for this type of job or not. And then we'll just fix you up. We'll just put a DBS in you and we'll just fix you up because there's something wrong with you. The medical images are showing us that you have a propensity for anxiety. Sorry, you can't be a pilot. Sorry, you can't do surgeries in a hospital. How long will it be before our insurance companies demand this medical imaging from us and our DNA samples? But you see, there are lots of copycats out there, and while these individuals were really sick and became much better, we have biohackers now trying to do the same thing. Why should the specialist engineers be the only ones to get implants? This is Mr. Tim Cannon, who literally probably took his mobile phone and shoved it in his arm with some help. Tim's contributing to an article I'm writing right now. But the maker revolution's really interested. He's got a multitude of sensors in that pack, in his forearm, and he's tethering it up to his iPad device, his tablet. I can see all my bioinformatic information. I'm so cool. The weird has become the new normal. And for most of us, we don't realize while we're busy solving medical problems with biomedical devices, everyone, the future is medical devices for non-medical applications. You're building to cure, to help, to perform miracles, to give people vision and to give people hearing. But I think Michael is right in his presentation earlier today. It'll be cosmetic types of surgeries, amplified man, enhanced humans. Give me more. I want to be faster. I want to see further. I want to hear greater distances away. Perhaps the subculture gaining great momentum, not just with tattooing, but implantation, will become the new normal. Implants galore. Tattooists all over the world now are hiring people who can specialize not only in piercing and scarification and branding, but also in implantation. Of course, wars cause grave injuries, and people have come back as amputees. The US, in particular, has poured in a lot of money into this field. Some amputees like to have different types of legs. They accumulate legs shorter, taller, to give them a mood sense depending on their context and where they're going, whether they're going out to dance or out to see the movies. There are some people who have already stated publicly on the internet who want to become amputees so they can become bionic. That's body modification taken to another level. I now just don't want implants in my face and my hands to automatically open doors so they can be located down to the X and Y coordinate using the GPS device that this RFID device is tethered to. I now want to amputate. I want to modify. I want to become the bionic woman and the bionic man. And of course, then we get to disputes of equality and equity. And if you followed what was happening in the 100-metre race in the Paralympics, someone fought with the first and second place and argued that his blades were longer than mine, and that's why he won the race. His blades were longer than mine. Where's the equity in that? Come on, new rules, new norms, standards. That's not fair. His blades were longer. And so now DARPA is pouring in $70 million since 2011 for post-traumatic stress disorder and memory implants in the brain. PTSD implantables. We're creating exoskeletons as if we're Iron Man or Iron Man, the series. At what point do we believe Hollywood? And at what point, as engineers, are we propagators of this myth? Of course, I will never renege the great leaps that are occurring in brain-to-computer interfaces and even to brain-to-brain interfaces, especially with the disabled. I don't know what it feels like to be stuck in a chair as a quadriplegic. I would love, I'm sure, if I was in this person's shoes, to be able to think and be able to pour myself a cup of water, or at least to feed myself. I do not negate these wonderful contributions. These innovations are helping people release themselves from their tragic state. Although I must say something to you. People who are quadriplegics from a young age don't think of themselves often as quadriplegics. Go online and see these wonderful, wonderful blog posts of people who are in states that we would not perhaps be able to contend with, who say, my life is normal. I am normal. And we have had this debate. Even Professor Clark has written about this debate with respect to cochlear implants and the right to cure deafness, and for those who wish to remain deaf to do so. That is a very complex debate. But I think what is happening here is that our society in general, given the disposable nature of all our technologies, we just think we can throw something away and put it back. We've become almost intolerant of disease and intolerant of pain, and we think no one should be in pain ever. I always do, but that's the plight of life. That's sadly, to some degree, what we contend with as human beings. This world is not perfect and never will be. So I defend these innovations, but I also know these innovations will be used for harm. And of course, there are young people now in laboratories, I've spoken to them, many of them engineers, who think this would be a great life. Because you see, what decays is the sarx, it's the body. And if I can do away with everything that's a limb or a heart or an organ, everything but my brain, I should be right, shouldn't I? Apart from brain atrophy of some sort, I should be right. And the Smithsonian Institute has very nicely illustrated here the 14 different vital parts of the body that have been and can be replaced by implants. But I would hate to be a recipient of just a brain, and C.S. Lewis wrote about this so eloquently in That Hideous Strength. A new laboratory in that novel was being brought up, and everyone was hush-hush about what was going on. And in that novel, we learn at the end about the head, and the head is just that. He's the head. It's a head. It's an amputated head that has learnt to live independently, hooked up to all these things, liquids going and flowing in and out of his body or his brain to keep him alive. And Mark, who's just joined the Research Institute, tries to figure out what they're talking about Francois Alcassan, who is the head. And he drives in these people, these engineers, to become like him, more heads, but he's the Godhead. He's the God on earth. And then if we put in artificial intelligence, many of us believe one day, you know, if you're just a head and you're living in a hive mind, or you're just downloading your consciousness onto a computer, as many have hypothesized one day will be possible, then we'll be assigned to this and that. We'll be told what work we should be doing, and there will be no free will. And that's the whole point with regards to these robotics and bionics and these machines that make decisions for us. No, actually, I don't think I want electrodes in my brain. And if I believe Ray Kurzweil, there may be 20,000 nanobots in my brain and my body, all talking to each other and helping me live longer. Well, how much longer? 200 years? We've seen what the current life expectancy has done. It's meant that there are more people suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's and more people crippled in nursing homes. Yes, we all want a longer life. We all want to see more. But living forever on earth is a fallacy. So are we wasting our time in some respect thinking we are going to build the ultimate DARPA machine that lives forever? I think, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm only going to get through a third of my talk today, but I think we've sort of forgotten that Old Testament tale. When Moses was up on the mount getting his 10 commandments, everyone else down below was busy throwing in all the silver and gold to make the calf to worship. Actually, I think we're worshipping technology today. And we're forgetting about the fact that we're flesh and blood. What are we toiling for? And that's the prioritization process. We have to think at the outset of these wonderful grants. And of course, I'm not new to research. I know what it's like. I've received certain transnational criminal grants because of the state of terrorism in our world, according at least to the politicians. So the grants come from governments propelling us to research in certain areas. Actually, what should we be researching and where should the funding be going when it's being squeezed all over the world for things in the humanities? Surely there is a role to play when we look at interdisciplinarity beyond just the engineers. And for those transhumanists who say to perhaps people of monotheistic backgrounds or non-monotheistic backgrounds in belief system, they say, you know, all this religion, it's why our world is in such a bad place. And I just say to them, really? your transhumanist cult couldn't be a worse religion. But it's this process of othering. It's this constant fear of death and going, we have to build an implant to solve this and download our consciousness because then we can live forever. Actually, I think we're going the wrong way. My fear is not this, ladies and gentlemen. Totally not this. It's not this. My fear is this. And analogize it a little bit further. We're all stuck in our labs, looking at this much of the world's problem. And of course, it's not for nothing. That's why we all vigorously wake up every morning to get to the office to keep working on our work, because we love our work and we see a mission in it and we see a purpose to it. But in actual fact, we're just getting a little bit zombified by it all sometimes. And we don't step back. We say we have no time because technology is pressuring us to keep going. And so where is the balance? The fundamental questions we should be asking ourselves, and I end with this point, is one of consent. And here I say informed consent. I had a sister who suffered with schizophrenia from the age of 16, and I'm sure when she consented to being a trial patient on electroconvulsive therapy, she really didn't give consent. And my parents really didn't know what was going on. And my parents really were not given the option for them to be there with her while she was undergoing this procedure. Today in the UK alone, 4,000 people get electroshock therapy. For some it works, and for some it does not. Insurance. Don't think that these things will not be linked up to insurance. Equity. The haves and the have-nots, those who can afford those implants and those who cannot. We've just wiped out 75%, I think, of the world's population because they can't afford and they don't have the technology. And where is the equity when we are driving so quickly forward with innovations and they are struggling to feed themselves? Security. I can tell you, every person with a pacemaker fears security. Security breaches, that is. Pacemakers, implants of all types can be hacked or they can be zapped. Just ask anyone in electromagnetics. In the future, we will not just have software hackers. They'll be the innocent hackers. We're going to have predator hackers that go around praying for people who they could zap and kill in 5 seconds flat. And people have proven this with brain-to-computer interface technology coming out of the University of Washington. I thank Tamara Bonacci for her work and her colleagues. Fairness, privacy. In fact, there's one slide on here which talks about George Orwell's prediction of that the only thing that was private was in the skull. I think medical imaging is changing that, and we need to be knowledgeable about what that means. Reliability. This data is not always reliable, nor is the accuracy of these devices. They can fail, but they can also cause other non-hardware related side effects. I think I'll leave it there. And to thank you for your patience in hearing this talk, and to thank you so much for the wonderful contributions you also made during the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katina. This was a wonderful talk, and I think a very good point here, I enjoyed this very much, is as scientists, we often get so focused and narrow down on the one problem that we're researching. We sometimes forget that there's a whole world out there and many, many other problems to think about. And if I want to do one thing is you made us think a little bit today after this. Thank you. Thank you. We're running a little bit short of time, and I know a lot of people have planes to catch. So I would like to invite Professor Mandyam Srinivasan to the stage, the convener of this symposium.
Oh, what a wonderful feast. On behalf of the Academy, I'd like to thank all of the speakers who are providing this amazing day for us. It's just been so wonderful, especially with this counterpoint that was provided by Katina. And I just have this one thought in my mind. So at one stage, I was thinking maybe of, at some stage, if it became necessary and I'd die, I could volunteer to donate some of my organs to someone who needed them. But I'm getting pretty old now. I don't think anyone will want them anyway. But quite apart from that, I think organ donation will become a thing of the past, because everything is now going to be bionic and artificial, so there's no need for organ donation anymore. And you also wonder about what's going to happen with all of these surrogate mothers, people in India who are donating organs. All that's going to be a thing of the past. So what about their livelihoods? That's something we have to think about too, I guess. In any case, thank you very much for this. And if you could go to the next slide and click on. We'd like to thank all of the sponsors who have already been thanked this morning, but I'd like to reinforce that. Thank you so much for making this possible. And more than anything else, there's several support staff. People in the Academy have done such a wonderful job of making this whole thing possible, and I'd like to thank them all. The next slide, I think. Yeah, if you click on Professor Pauline Ladiges, who's been instrumental in sort of providing a lot of advice, senior, sort of beautiful, informed advice about, inviting people. Ray Kellett with the logistics, the communication outreach team, including Joanne Monks, who does almost everything we can think of. Thank you so much, Joanne. And Kylie Walker, who is very instrumental in bringing this thing together, as well as Mitchell, PhD. So thank you all for a great event. Thank you. And before I forget, there's a phone that was misplaced, found, I can't remember exactly where. But would the owner please come and collect it if they recognize it? And there's also a couple of other lost and found items that are there at the reception for anyone who's missing anything. So thank you all. Have a good, safe trip back home, and thank you once again.
My research area is focused on early intervention, originally in schizophrenia and psychotic illnesses in young people, but in recent years it's broadened out to cover the full range of emerging mental illness in young people. And I've tried to develop new treatments, new models of care, and to understand the causes of mental ill health.
Soil is not, as many people might think, a renewable resource. It's something that takes thousands and really tens of thousands of years to form, and that's why it's very precious and we have to look after it, because once we destroy it, it takes a long time to recover. Soil is the skin of the earth, that very thin skin of the earth. It mediates all the biogeochemical processes on the earth. I guess people don't know that most of the carbon in the terrestrial environment is actually in the soil. And of course, soil's so crucial for growing plants, for agriculture, and we all need to eat, so we all need food, so soil's important for food security.
My field of research is gravitational physics, and I work in the particular areas of black hole physics, cosmology and gravitational waves. Something like the detection of gravitational waves is a discovery that most of us could only dream of happening in our working lifetime in research. We'd worked for it for a very long time, and we knew that the detectors were reaching a sensitivity where we could expect now to detect an event. But still, to have one come in so quickly and so clearly, that was a defining moment for all of us in science. It was incredible.
I'm a surface chemist, and what the group does as a whole is modify surfaces with a high degree of control to give them a new functionality. It's important because so much of what we do in the world, what we interact with, happens at a surface. And so we make materials that have a certain function, but just by changing the single layer of molecules across that surface, we can change that function to give them a whole new capability. That could be something like a sensor, so like a glucose meter that a diabetic uses, or a pregnancy test kit. There are two types of measurement devices that we work on, but we make a whole range of new types of things you could detect.
Most of my work has been on an intermediate scale of how we actually predict next year's climate or its climate impact from the El Niño Southern Oscillation or ENSO phenomenon. Weather and climate variations affect almost everything we do. Bushfires are affected by climate. Whether you're a farmer, droughts are a climate phenomenon, a weather phenomenon. Heat waves kill lots of people in Australia still. The better we can make predictions of those sorts of phenomena means we can save lives and improve livelihoods.
We visualize the molecules of life, and if you see where the atoms are and the bonds that hold the atoms together and the shape of the molecules and their charges, then you can understand how they interact with each other and how they function. The intricacy of molecular machines. I love motors and cars and planes, but biological machines are just much more advanced and complex. They are really fascinating.
We've had some really great people working in AI, so when I got the opportunity to come here a dozen years ago, I leapt at the opportunity. It's important because it's going to have a profound economic impact upon our lives. The computers are going to take over many of our jobs, but it's also one of those really profound questions about who we are. Is there something special about us? Is there something special about our intelligence? Or is it something that we could get or even surpass in silico?
10 years ago, there were no known validated genetic variants for schizophrenia, and now we have more than 100. And so that's 100 new openings for other areas of research to follow up and understand this complex disorder. It feels like we're at the tip of the iceberg, but that we've reached the iceberg, and actually it's a very exciting stage. Making progress in prevention, diagnosis and treatments of psychiatric disorders is a really important goal for me. I think these are disorders which are so common in society, and they impact family members as well as those affected.
As we've gained understanding of the system, we realise now that it's an integral part of our climate system, and many of the questions we want to know about what our climate system's doing now and what we'll do in the future require answers from Antarctica. For the first time, we now have accurate estimates of what the mass balance of the Antarctic is, whether it's gaining ice and snow or losing it, and hence the effect on sea level. We've got several different techniques, all based on space measurements to do that. We're at the moment losing ice from Antarctica, and it's contributing to sea level rise.
So our research is based on trying to find new drugs to treat the malaria parasite. So malaria is a nasty disease. It kills probably around about 600 to 800,000 people in the world every year. And these people are largely children just at the beginning of their life. The problem with malaria is that all current therapies have a really short time frame before the parasite becomes resistant. So our research is built around trying to understand how the host, i.e. humans, interacts with the parasite, i.e. the malaria parasite. If I could develop a drug with my team that could actually treat children in Africa and prevent them from dying from malaria, that would fill me with an enormous degree of satisfaction.
I was born with the science gene. From my earliest days, I can remember being interested in human body, in gadgets. As I grew up, I became interested in electronics.
I was just intrinsically interested in the fact that the nervous system ran electrically. And as an electrical engineer, I had always been interested in the circuit side of things, not the power engineering, in other words, the microelectronics. And what I knew about the brain intrigued me as being a biological equivalent of that.
What I personally like most of all in my work, it is a possibility to engage with other people, with the colleagues, with my students, with the visiting academics, with just the students from UNSW. That's what makes our work, in fact, very, very rewarding.
One of the great hopes, now that we have achieved first detection of gravitational waves, is that we will inspire a new generation of young scientists. I am really looking forward to teaching my course in second semester on advanced theoretical physics, which has half of it on general relativity. Because for the first time ever, I will be able to talk about the detection of gravitational waves, which is an incredible validation of Einstein's theory.
Science for me was, it was inevitable. It's the only thing that really drove my passion. I had to be a scientist. It wasn't a choice, it's what I had to do. Science gives me the time to think deeply about things and opens up some wonderful areas that you wouldn't otherwise find.
The reason I became a scientist, I think I can trace back to, an inspirational science teacher. So thank you very much, Mr. Waller. My very first grade science teacher. I think we should always recognise the inspiration that teachers provide. And then it's just the product of an education. Again, it's wonderful. No one in my family ever went to university before. So I've been lucky enough to have a very long education, and I just have an inquiring mind. I want to understand what makes the universe tick.
I think the main thing that inspires me is working with so many creative people, to work on an idea